Partridge, talking to you from home. This is the meeting of the House Agriculture and Forestry Committee on Friday, May 29th. And we are going to be considering the governor's proposal for dairy and dairy processors. And as you recall, at our last meeting, it was laid out to us by the Secretary of Ag, Food and Markets, Anson Tebbetts, and his assistants, Deputy Eastman and Steve Collier, the attorney for Ag. The program, which was going to be a total of $50 million, $40 million for dairy farmers, and $10 million for dairy processors, cheesemakers. So we have several guests with us, although not all have joined us yet. And we will start, I'm going to go in order, but may jump around a little bit. We have Dina Benjamin here from Riverview Farm in Franklin. And Dina, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your farm.
Hi, everybody. Again, I'm Dina Benjamin. We milk about 500 cows here in Franklin. We have an anaerobic digester. We farm with our 5 children, my husband and I, and we love it. That's
You gotta love it.
Yep, well, seriously, we gotta love it. Do I just proceed into what I'd like to say, or is this structured?
Yes, please proceed with what you'd like to say.
Okay. So we're excited that this money's available, and just to give kind of a little bit more detail on our farm. I mean, we were just getting current with our vendors. I mean, as everybody knows, it's been a struggle for the last few years. And we were in a fairly decent place in January with a forecast that was pretty optimistic. When COVID hit, it hit really hard, and service work basically stopped for our farm. We do business with a Canadian vendor for our digester, and that stopped immediately. Our digester has not been running for the last 2 months. And how that is important is we supply bedding to 2 other farms along with ourselves. So our temperature right now in our digester is 68 degrees, and you need to meet a certain degree in order to kill the pathogens. So that's pretty much, our digester is pretty much dead in the water, which is making us and 2 other farms rely heavily on sawdust. And sawdust, and I'm sure that you're aware, is pretty expensive and sometimes hard to get because of COVID. So that's a pretty severe hit for our farm. We have families and vendors that are needing us right now, and I have gone, within 2 months, I have gone from feeling confident to barely making payroll again. So that's an uncomfortable feeling. I urge this to be passed swiftly and no delays. Personally speaking, we need the money now. We need the money now. And in a couple of months, I'm not really sure what the need is going to be, or if we're even going to be here. I mean, we're having those hard discussions around our kitchen table now. This is an expensive time of year for us. With only being able to meet payroll, we're lucky we have a great relationship with our vendors. So that's really all that when Mandy said that I had this opportunity, I wanted to jump on it because it's so important. This is smooth sailing just as quickly as possible.
Thanks, Dina. And we really appreciate your being willing to spend the time with us today as well. One of the things that we'd ask you to think about, and maybe you don't have any comments about it now, but you know, the package for farmers is $40 million. You know, do you think that we would need more, you know, because we could potentially suggest that we up that amount. And, you know, based on testimony that we can hear, that we will hear, we could do that. So you don't have to comment right at the second, but if you want to think about it and then come back later with a thought, that would be fine.
No, I mean, I could tell you that I would love more. I can tell you that, but I will. I'll think of it and maybe articulate that in a more fancier way. But that sounds great.
Just Dina, as a follow-up, how many cows do you milk? What size farm is yours?
So we're a medium farm operation. We milk just shy of 500. We have about 900 total head.
Okay. Okay. Great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Can I just jump in real quick. Dina has been is a little bit shy this morning, and I just want her to just share with the committee all the work that her farm has done in the last 4 years, and certainly the investments they've made. She's one of the Lake Carmi farmers, and I just think the committee would like to hear, Dina, the investments you've made and the practices that you're implementing, which do take additional money. And I just would like you to just share that little bit so they have a full picture of what you do and how many farms remain in the town of Franklin.
So we manure inject. We inject our manure to 100% of our corn ground. We, again, have an anaerobic digester that someday will spark up again. We're working with UVM on 2 research projects regarding cover cropping. Right now, all our fields are cover cropped. We work closely with the watershed. Gosh, Mandy, we do so much. I should have a list here. But it's, we feel that we are doing our part wherever we can on water conservation and thanks, Mandy.
No, I mean, I'm just really super proud of their dairy farm because, you know, a couple of years ago, I'm sure your committee has had people, other groups come in and talk about the care around Lake Carmi, which we're all very invested in, care deeply. And I just wanted to show the work that they have done, and they do no-till practices and have worked increasingly to just really benefit everyone in their practices. And I guess I'm just really proud of them. They're a caring dairy farm and multiple generations. And it's just, to me, it's really one of those farms that if they could have a bridge, they've done all the hard work necessary to keep this going. So I guess that I just wanted to kind of force her into saying a little bit more. She's very humble, but I thank you, Dina, for adding that.
I'm going to get better at this. I promise you. The more that she puts me in front of the camera or my cell phone or the laptop, I'm going to get amazing. I know it. It's just not happening yet. But right prior to COVID, we went and, you know, the forecast was looking great. So we decided to budget some cow collars for our animals. And what it does is when they're not feeling well, it's a whole software package, and we're able to target that cow and go right to her right off. And that was a huge investment for us, but we felt good about that because things were looking up. So we made that investment. Yeah. Again, like I said, 100% of our crops are no-till with a cover crop to help with the runoff, maintain a healthy, robust soil base. I think we farm responsibly, and our carbon footprint is pretty decent. So thanks, Mandy, for helping me there.
Dina, thanks so much. I have two questions. I have Vicky Strong has her hand up, and so does John O'Brien. Then I know that we need to go to Will Gladstone. He has a time crunch here, but Vicky, would you like to ask your question?
I just wondered, Dina, I don't know a lot about anaerobic digesters. Why is it you can't be running that right now? What's different now with COVID than it was prior, so that you can't be using it?
So the digester requires daily maintenance. So what happened is our screens totally went blank. So we're trying to figure out if it's a software issue with the PLCs or what it is. But what it does is it's not COVID shut us down. Like we couldn't get any help. Our vendor that fixes the digester is in Canada. So they closed the borders. His company, even though farms are listed as essential, his company had regulations that wouldn't let him come. So we're just waiting for the border to open up, for everything to kind of loosen up, and then we can get that running. And it just had a terrible trickle down effect. I mean, it rippled through 2 other farms. Sawdust is pretty expensive, and when you've used composted bedding, it's kind of a hard switch, and you definitely have to switch, because without that temperature at like, I think it's like 90 something degrees, the pathogens aren't killed and you can't use it. It'll be too much bacteria for the cows. So that's why there's just no service technicians that can work on it.
Thanks, Dina. John O'Brien.
There we go. Thanks for coming on, Dina. This is a question for you and the other dairy farmers. Steve Collier, the counsel for the agency, described to us that in order to get, like, you could potentially get up to $90,000 with this bill, but you're going to have to show expenses or lost revenue due specifically to COVID. Now, is that going to be a challenge for you and the other dairy farmers? Because a lot would depend on that diving milk per 100 price. But in your case, maybe like not running your digester, you clearly could show there was loss there. I don't know, just throwing that out as far as how hard that is going to be for each farm to show loss.
Right. Speaking solely for my farm, it won't be hard at all. Our profit, dairy farms, our profit has always been in that last 15%. And that's gone, so speaking for our farm only, not a problem. I'm only meeting payroll. So I am 2 to 3 months behind on all my vendors. It'll be pretty easy to do the math.
Great. Thank you, Dina.
Thank you.
All right. We are going to move to Will Gladstone. And Will, thank you for your patience. If you would like to introduce yourself and let us know a little bit about your farm, we'd appreciate it. Welcome. And you need to unmute yourself, or we can unmute you. Do you know how to unmute yourself, Will?
Am I unmuted now?
Yes, great.
Okay.
Good job.
Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. So, Mandy got me set up to talk with you folks about what we're doing out here on our farm. And I'm a second generation farmer on our farm in Bradford, Vermont. Farm with my 2 parents and my younger brother. We milk about 1,500 cows, and COVID has really affected us, and is going to affect us more from the revenue side moving forward. We also have a very diverse operation. We grow 200 acres of wholesale pumpkins, so we're really hoping this year is going to be a great year for pumpkins as dairy looks to be kind of shaky at best. I guess speaking to the whole COVID side, as you guys all know, there in the first week or so, there was a major shortage in the grocery stores of fluid milk. And then everyone, rushed to the stores, bought out the grocery stores. And then there was a huge demand for fluid milk. And that very quickly shifted to the point where there was many loads in the Northeast and across our country being dumped, which then trickles down to us as farmers. As far as our co-op that we're a part of Agrimark, and they asked us on the last day of April, if you guys can only imagine this, how hard this would be to plan to reduce our production for maize milk by 6%. DFA asked their members to reduce by 15%. So that's just a huge blow. As we all know, like Dina said, we hopefully make a profit on those last handful percentage points, and now that's going to be a struggle. With Agrimark, they actually have on the last 6%, it's a $14 a hundredweight penalty. So for the month of May, I believe that they're actually going to charge their members to pick up the milk. So I know many producers here in the next day or so, large producers, small producers, medium producers, that are going to get here down to the wire and are going to be dumping a lot of milk. So it's pretty tough out here right now. I mean, it looks like things in the futures markets have rebounded, but for us as a farm, this next milk check's going to be extremely low, and we will not, just like Dina said, be able to pay our vendors as quickly, or we'll have to take out money on our operating line, or hopefully get this stimulus package that you folks are going to put forth, and then we can utilize that to actually pay our bills. This year looked like it was going to be a great year. We had a bunch of different projects that we were going to do. We were going to build a shop. We were going to change how we separate our sand out of our manure stream, because we bed with sand bedding. So a lot of those projects have been postponed, which really does no good to the local economy as well, because that money just keeps circulating around. So we desperately need this money sooner than later. And I think earlier someone asked if there was a way for us to prove our losses. It'll be quite easy to do in the next month or so, based on milk receipts and so forth. So
Thank you, Will.
You're
Really
welcome.
appreciate it. Yeah. Questions for Will? All right, we're gonna hop back. Oh, no, Terry has his hand up. Terry?
Hi, well, you said you had 1,500 cows.
Yep, that's
Yep.
correct.
What do you consider, because I just got an email from Diane Barfield yesterday, and it looks like maybe the milk prices might be, say, by September, she predicted, well, this is for class, 3? Would be 16.25, and class 4 is 14.81. Do you have a sort of a ballpark where you consider a break-even point on your milk price? I mean, it used to be somewhere around 19, but I wondered if obviously you don't make any money at 14.
No, definitely not. I would say our break even, and we know this pretty well from working with different business consultants, is to cash flow and not to deal with much depreciation, maybe a little bit, we're somewhere in that $18 a hundred ballpark. I can tell you that I hope and pray that we don't have a second wave of COVID, because the futures markets look good right now, but the last 2 weeks they have been limit up, which is very abnormal, 3 different days, and then prior to that limit down. So there's so much variability right now that actually some of these insurance programs that different producers have access to, the premiums are quite expensive now because of the amount of volatility. Is class 3 going to be 1650 in September? I think your guess is as good as mine right now. But I can tell you for maize milk, we're going to be in that 12 to 1250, 100 weight for class 3, and that is way below anyone's cost of production in our state.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of it depends on whether the restaurants are going to be able to open. And I mean, honestly, who knows whether schools will open in September the way things go. I mean,
Right.
if you watch the news, you would say, nah, probably not. But that's just a thought. But good luck.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Terry. Vicky's hand is up as well. Vicky?
Good morning, Will. Thank you for joining us. I just wondered if you could share a little bit about how you do drop your milk production when they're asking or needing less milk. What are you shipping cows or drying them off? What's your strategy there?
So a lot of producers have culled cows or beef cows sooner than before. Beef prices have been okay and highly variable there. To be honest with you, what we did, and this was extremely costly, our cows right now are averaging about 98 to 100 pounds a cow, and we did not want to have to cut our cows back. So actually what we did is we went out and purchased a handful of farms bases that wanted to go out of business, and were able to transfer their base to our farm. Now, the interesting thing that Agrimark has done is they only let half of the base transfer. So the other half's lost forever, essentially, in my opinion. And so that was a whole nother expense. It was kind of like, I told someone the other day, it was like prepaying your losses. I guess we just did it quicker than other folks.
Okay, thanks, Will. Any other questions for Will? All right, thank you so much, Will, and you're welcome to stick around if you can. If you have to leave us, we really appreciate your time today. And we'll move back to the beginning of the agenda for this morning, and we'll go to Darlene Reynolds. And Darlene, thanks for being patient.
Sorry, hit the wrong button.
That's okay. We're all getting the hang of this.
Nice to see you guys. Saw you guys last week. And Amanda and Bill asked me to speak again today, so I feel really fortunate. Super excited to hear the governor speak about the $40 million that they wanted to use to help dairy farmers right now. I can't reiterate enough of what Dina and Will say. I think all of our farms, know that we are going through some significant losses because of COVID and some trying times, and to get services, as Dina has spoken of, and Will, and trying to take and find unique ways as we're entrepreneurs to continue farming. One thing Dina, I think, forgot to mention is that she is one of the farmers who did the hemp program this year. So she also was daring enough to do some diversification too, which I'm super proud of. I kind of sat back and waited to see how that played out for everybody, but they are truly entrepreneurs in that, and really tried to take and pull that through. It was a really tough year, I know, for them to do that, and the amount of people purchasing the hemp at the end of the year wasn't quite there for most farmers, which we all know. I will say that two things that weren't spoken of is, one, class 3 and class 4 are trending through the CME. And that price that Terry had spoke of for September is pretty normal, actually, because we also put it in with class 1. And I think a lot of people forget about looking at that class 1 price. And for May, class 1 was $12.95, which is significantly lower than you could even imagine. And it's always, class 1 is always announced about 15 days before the beginning of the next month. And it already has come out for June, and class 1 for June has come out at $11.42. So I don't even understand how it could be that low with everybody jumping to the stores to buy gallons of fluid milk. I'm confused myself. Sometimes I feel like somebody needs to explain that to me personally, but that's where that's sitting right now. And I don't think there's any change in that because it always comes out, like I said, before the month even begins. So with that pushed forward, I want to say that I hope that you guys see that kind of urgency that's coming in, because like Dina says, we are strictly trying to pay the grain bill and payroll right now. Pretty much that's it. And when it comes to the vendors that we have throughout this state, they've been great for the past 5 years, but I don't know how much more pressure they can take. They are great people to work with. I'm not going to deny it, but they are under a tremendous amount of stress because they were just barely starting to get some extra monies from us in the past 6 months. So I think that just trying to boost this economy through the entire state, not just for dairy farmers, but for everybody that we do business with, is super, super important. And that's why I think I was so excited to hear the governor speak of this money, which is a significant amount of money to me personally to put into the state, was amazing. And to answer your question, more is always better. I think moving forward as we go into the fall, I know many farmers are looking at other ways to diversify, like Will does with his pumpkins. And I also think that, again, like he said, everybody's looking at these insurances, that we are trying to find a way to find a floor right now, to hit those floors so that we don't end up into these situations again. So, I mean, I know I kind of told a lot of information all at once, and if anybody has any questions, that's great. I'm not going to go into too much about my farm because I spoke to you guys last week. But know that my 2 daughters are out there right now testing DHIA for me and helping me out. And then the other thing we've done in the last few weeks is we transferred over our automatic calf feeder to all whole milk. So now we're literally taking whole milk from our farm to help with that production cut and bringing it over to our calf facility so that they can use that in the automatic calf feeder, which is taking about 1,800 pounds a day right now off our farm just to feed the animals over there. So those are the kinds of cuts we're doing.
Great. Thanks, Darlene. You probably mentioned it last week, but I'm not remembering. How many cows do you milk?
We're a medium farm. We milk a little over 600 most of the time. And we're just under the cusp of 700, but we do raise our own heifers on separate facilities, and we probably raise another 450 heifers.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. Are there any other questions for Darlene at this moment? All right, I'm not seeing any little blue hands. Darlene, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Let's see. I know either we go to Amanda or Bill. And Amanda, it looks like you're up first.
Thank you for your committee having us again. And again, just really want to focus on any questions any committee members would have on the 40 million that's proposed, how to get it out to the farmers swiftly. We've worked really hard in our discussions and trying to come up with the forecasted amount that we thought of Vermont Dairy Producers Alliance. I should say I'm the executive director of that, and I'm speaking here on behalf of that organization as well as a dairy farmer. But we came up with a proposal of about 14 million a month is what we figured with the prices 3 or 4 weeks ago that we were seeing to get through as a bridge. And we were very excited and pleased to hear the package announced. And as part of our proposal, the key was to get it out the door swiftly, without delay. The farmers need it now. And that's what we're hoping and proposing, and to keep whatever mechanism simple. Proving losses, I don't think is an issue, but I do think who's processing the applications and the staff available, and is it going to be a delay? That to me is a bigger concern. I would suggest, if we're looking at prices and comparisons, we use the January 1st price as, pre-COVID. And, we were going into the year with these forecasted prices looking really good. And that's my concern as we look to the fall, and we may see some climbs in the market and get optimistic. Well, we know what happens, when COVID may come back for a second round. The concern that as much as we've grown our markets to look better, it's going to come crashing down again. And so I'm getting a lot of calls from farmers who did not participate in the insurance program and asking questions. How do you do it, and at what price? And so even now, as we're looking to maybe book the third and fourth quarter, you need to understand that farmers are spending money for this insurance premium below the cost of production. So they're paying money to book a floor that they know is going to lose them money, but it would at least lose them less money, which doesn't make for a very good average for a year that was really one that we were all working hard for. And I can't stress, there have been some comments, made in other committees and in other testimonies that dairy is a failing industry. And I don't want to diverse too far off this funding package, but I think any food industry, for the security of our country, our state, and our Vermonters, should not be a failing industry. And I think Heather Darby from UVM really was very succinct in her testimony. In the Midwest, when they're killing hogs and burying them because they can't get them to market, when we have people going hungry, we have kids going hungry, we have people around the world going hungry. The biggest lesson that I've learned in this COVID is I live in a little town in the corner of Vermont on the Canadian border, but I am connected to that person in China in ways that I never thought I would be, in a matter of weeks. And that is the reality of the world we're living in. And so for me, any type of food production in our country should be essential, and it should be protected for the safety and for the security. And so any questions that anyone has, I think that's what Bill and I are here for, is to help navigate maybe any questions on getting the money out to farmers, and any questions maybe in the other waves that perhaps funding would come. We did put in some medium and long-term goals as part of our proposal, which we would love to discuss maybe in informal discussions in the fall, prior to your next session next year, where we do look at some investments into our industry and some ideas that can help further diversify us, and also secure more work around carbon credits and water quality, while giving some compensation to dairy farms that do the work. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Amanda. I look forward to hearing some of those ideas. Terry has his hand up, but I have a quick question. I remember you mentioning the last time we spoke, kind of a total, and we were discussing a package that was $8.8 million. And I remember you bringing up a figure, and I think it's based on the 14 million per month. What was the total figure that you had mentioned at the time?
So our proposal was really looking at a 3-month, period, and it was 14 million a month, based on 750 of losses in our milk price per hundredweight, which is across the board, whether you're an Agrimark producer or a DFA producer, any size farm. That's really the equal way, right? We're all paid for our price of milk, and it doesn't matter what size farm you are. So that's how we came up with that number. And we also factored in the reduction that we're all asked to make again. You know, Dina said it, and Will as well, and Darlene, that, you know, the last 15% is where we make our money, and now we're cutting in DFA 15% or as close as we can without hurting our cows. You know, you don't want to, as Will touched upon, you don't want to hurt your cows that are really in their peak of lactation, because you want them to stay healthy and they're your superstars. So you look at other ways of cutting production without harming that cycle that those animals are in, because if you do too much, they're not going to come back in that manner. So, but yeah, it was 14 million a month was the price that we had come up with.
Okay, and that was for 3 months.
Yeah, that was looking at, because, you know, forecasting prices, it's so hard. We thought a 3-month period we could kind of look. Of course, now we're another 6 to 8 weeks in, and we could look at the next couple months as well. But that was at the time we put the proposal together.
Okay, so that would be 42 million, which is in the ballpark of the governor's suggestion. But we're also able to ask for more potentially if we want to as part of the process. So be thinking about that. Terry, do you have a question or a comment?
Mandy, I don't know if you know this or whether I think I should know this, but we haven't really seen details of the governor's plan. At least I haven't. But a friend of mine was asking about the what kind of rules, restrictions the farmers had. Like, well, obviously we need to prove that this money was lost through the COVID, but is there other restrictions like water quality or things like that that you know of?
So, you know, I haven't seen the exact specifics. I've had, you know, people look at it and I've asked questions. And what I'm hearing is that they're trying to make this with the least amount of restrictions to get the money out the door as quickly as possible. I have heard there's potentially 3 farms that may not get the money due to some water quality issues. I have not been able to, I think it really depends on your committees and what you propose, in all honesty, you know. But that's what I've heard as the only limitations. And my only urge is that this money is for losses. It's not state money for grant, you know, it's not that type of money that would have come naturally in any kind of budget situation. So, you know, it's this money is not going to stay at the farmer. And I think that's really the key point. I mean, this money is going to be paid to vendors, and it's going to keep that money in the community, and it circulates 7 or 8 times. So I would say less restrictions, the better. The more farmers you can get this money to, the better. And that's really all I've heard. I haven't seen the exact layout, and I hope to learn more maybe in the Senate Ag to see what details they have gotten as well.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of look at it as a stimulus check, the same as the 1,200 that, well, I got 1,200, and they said, well, somebody was complaining to me that, well, I don't think people on Social Security should be getting this $1,200. And I said, you know, this is not a gift. I say it's a stimulus check, and trust me, we spent it right away. And, you know, and the purpose was to stimulate the economy. And I think this is very similar to that, because there's so many vendors that deal with farmers that aren't going to get paid, and if you want to keep them in operation as well as the farmers, you better be able to pay them, because IBA and those people, they're not going to come around and keep giving you pails of chlorine just because you're a nice person. They just cannot do it. And you know, grain companies can't hold, you know, $1 million in debt for every farm that they're dealing with and still stay in business. So
I think I heard the number for the grain companies from Vermont. I think it was either Cubby Bordeaux or Josh Poulin, that they're holding around 200 to 210 million in unsecured debt.
Yeah, I've heard that too, Amanda.
Yeah, which is scary.
Yep.
once that grain is eaten up, That's it. You can't go back and pick it back up.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Amanda, thank you so much for spending time with us. We really appreciate it. Can you say, I heard you say something about farms that were not in good standing with water quality were potentially not going to be able to apply. Is that correct?
Well, that's what I've been hearing, and I've done several inquiries on that, and I was concerned at how many farmers that were, what the number of that would have affected. And I don't know, I haven't seen the exact language. I think it's being talked about, and I guess I would just really encourage to get this money to all the farms if possible, at least this first round, and then if we need to put more restrictions on down the road. But that money's not going to stay with that farmer. It's going to go to vendors who have done the work, and it's going to just keep our infrastructure. And I would hate to see it that way, even if it's 3 farms. I just would hate to see that.
Thanks, Mandy. Michael O'Grady has appeared, and so I know he wants to say something. Mike?
So the good standing criteria is in the Senate draft legislation, their dairy assistance program. It's based on the good standing requirement for ag water quality financing. You can't get ag water quality financing if you're not in good standing with the agency. Good standing is not, it's a very far down the enforcement road. It's when someone is not complying with the agency's order, is basically affirmatively not attempting to fix a water quality issue or other issue. It's not just because somebody has a discrete issue that pops up that the agency identifies. It's when a farm is basically actively not complying with the agency's request or order. And there's only 3 farms currently that are not in good stand.
So Mike, is that also part of the administration's proposal, that condition?
It is not part of the administration's proposal.
Okay, thank you. All right, I see that John O'Brien has his hand up. John?
Oh, I just wanted to echo what's been said here. I think we could call this bill actually relief for dairy vendors instead of for dairy farmers, because it's going to be, in the dairy farmers' hands for about, in 2 shakes of a lamb's tail, right? It's going to be gone, all to dairy vendors. But the question is, we should probably be thinking about a second program that's actually relief for dairy farmers and what that would look like. And so I don't know if there's been discussion, whether it's price supports or something else. What would say a fall program, if we could use federal and state dollars, what would that look like? Would it be more of the same, or would it be something that might at least get you, say, to January 1st, 2021?
So, just my opinion on this, and we're certainly going to be doing more work and watching the markets and seeing, I think a lot of it really depends on how does the next round of COVID hit. If schools aren't opening, if restaurants can't serve, it's also the forms of what our product can get into our country's hands, right? Is it in bulk? Is it in little servings? How is the processing? Our processing plants dealing with employees who can't come in and process the product? So, it's just so unknown. And I think, my gut is telling me it's going to be necessary. I'm looking at insurance programs, and I just want to have something booked by July 1st, because my gut is saying that even though markets may look to rebound a little bit, and keep in mind, we're still well below the cost of production. When you're looking at $11 or $12 milk, when you get to 14, you're feeling, hey, it went up $2, but you're still, $5 or $6, $7 below your cost of production. But my gut is telling me that, it's going to be a full year. Unfortunately, we were hopeful the fall was going to come back and average us out better. but I'm just not seeing it. And every week that goes by, I'm not seeing it. So I do think there's going to have to be probably a second or a third wave of some type of assistance.
Thanks, Mandy. Sharon has her hand up. Sharon?
Thank you. We've taken testimony too about how our food systems are kind of being exposed for, as Mandy said, these connections we have with somebody in China, or Mexico, where most of the parts are manufactured for repairing commercial trucks. I keep trying to find, I feel like we're in an escape room. For those of you who don't know, people actually pay to go into a room that they lock you into and you have to figure out how to get out of. It's called an escape room. One of my kids paid to do it. Anyway, and that, while Vermonters don't consume most of the milk that we're producing, it's in the Northeast. We're taking care of Boston and New York, and I'm trying to find a way, a way forward with, confirming that food security is regional security, is local security. If we don't have the food that we need when a system breaks down, we are incredibly vulnerable. And I'm just wondering, what the future of dairy looks like in that regard. Like growing pumpkins, great, or sugaring, like your boys do, Mandy, and trying to find other ways where dairy farmers aren't as vulnerable because they have something else. Or it just, obviously, if the solution was easy, it would have been found right now. I just want to express my profound frustration. I guess it's not a question, but if somebody has something useful to add to this.
And if I can respond to Sharon, and you're right. And the thing that I think is being lost is in the last 10 years, in the last 4 years, farmers are doing just that. They are looking at ways of diversifying. I just don't know, as that story is being told. And what happens is when you diversify, you can't go 100% into it. So I'm going to use hemp as an example. A lot of farms took that and ran with it, and like Darlene and Dina, entrepreneur thinking, and it didn't work out so great, and so there were losses. But they're going to keep trying to find something that fits. But you can't offset your investment into one aspect of the industry and make it equal to. So in our situation, we're diversified, and guess where that money goes? It goes into the dairy, right? And we're looking for more balance over the next, my kids' lifetime as they take over the farm. But it's not, it's not a quick fix. Like, you have to diversify as a percentage and then add a little more and add a little more. And it's really about, the investments that you had already made. But I want the community to really understand, farmers are hearing this and they're working really hard to do it. It's just still a smaller piece of their total investment into Vermont economy. So in another 5 years, you're going to see it more balanced probably. Maybe it won't be 50-50, but maybe it'll be 25-75. It's ramping up, and farmers are really looking at that. And I think if funds are spent in this way, and we need to do another wave, there may need to be more funding brought in. But I want everyone to know that the farmers I'm talking to and about and for are farmers that are really invested to being here in 10, 15 years, and to do the very thing, Sharon, that you're asking, and to look at different ways. But I do think dairy is going to remain, vital as an economic force, and it's just going to look a little bit of a different piece of a pie,
Thanks, Amanda. I want to make sure we get to Bill Rowell, who is also here and has been incredibly patient. Bill, thanks for joining us this morning, and feel free to add to the conversation here.
Well, I don't have a lot else to say that hasn't already been said. I will tell you that for the last month, or maybe a little better than a month. I've been working on a plan at the national level, and I'd worked with a few different people. I was trying to figure out how we could do this ourselves as farmers. And the thing that our problem actually has to do with the fact that the markets aren't moving. How would you make the markets move? You'd make the markets move by doing something like maybe focusing on your export partners and maybe doing a feeding program with them to stimulate the markets to move. You do it through maybe the agriculture marketing service and use government vouchers to pay for it. If it was a feeding program, it wouldn't challenge the free market. Therefore, WTO, World Trade Organization, wouldn't be a problem. So I got down the road pretty good with this. I ran it by some folks at the national level, and everybody seemed to like it. But then I ran into one of the guys I talked with was Mike McCloskey at the Fair Oaks Dairy in Indiana, and he said, well, he's on the board of National Milk Producers Federation, and he said, you know, we've got something similar to what you're talking about that we're working on. And so anyway, I arranged a conference call through DFA with their lobbyist in DC and with a previous chair of the National Dairy Promotion Board, who's a good friend of mine. And somebody from Tom Vilsack's office, because he's head of, Tom Vilsack's now head of U.S. Dairy Export Council. And they were pretty quiet. And I thought, well, gee, that's funny. This was Monday, May 18th at 4:30 in the afternoon. These folks, there were 7 of us on the call. They were kind of quiet. And then they had some insight, and I said, well, what's going on here? They said, did you get the letter? And I said, I don't know what you're talking about, get the letter. They said, the president of National Milk, president of U.S. Dairy Export, and the president of International Dairy Foods Association signed a letter and sent it to Sonny Perdue to do something along the lines of what you're talking about. And their program didn't use ag marketing service or government vouchers. I think it probably would have gone through the commodity credit, you know, the CCC program through the Secretary of Agriculture. But they focused on countries that have a food deficit issue and countries that we, I guess, normally don't do business with, like countries in Africa that have a food deficit problem. I thought that it'd be better to focus on our export partners. You take Mexico, for example. I think their peso is worth 23 cents against our dollar. So that's our chief export market. Why wouldn't we do business with them and do a feeding program with them? So anyway, my point is, you may come up with a good idea to do something, but there are other people working to protect their interests. And I'm sure that those folks in those 3 big organizations didn't want to be upstaged by some Vermont farmer that came up with that idea on his own without any of their input. So now what I would ask of them is, so make it happen. And where's the money? We need the money now. We can't wait a lot longer. And that may sound a bit blunt, but the farmers are to the point where that a little money would be quite a welcome relief, because the vendors get to the point where that they can't hang on, and we don't want to lose our infrastructure, do we? And we don't want to lose farms either. But you must be getting close. I'll ask you that. Are you getting close to dispersing some money? What kind of a time frame are we looking at? Do you have any idea, Carolyn?
I think the idea, Bill, is to get this out as quickly as possible. And
Yeah.
so we're being asked to give our recommendation to appropriations by tomorrow. You know, I mean,
Like tomorrow?
not tomorrow, but quickly. We've now heard from dairy farmers. I think we should, to do due diligence, we should probably hear from some of the processors, the cheesemakers. I can't imagine anybody's going to say, no, we don't want the money. But the question is, should we ask for more in this instance? And I need to have a little bit of committee participation in terms of what, what they think we should do. Should we support this proposal that the agency has, that the agency and the governor have put forward? Should we ask for more? And I'm really sorry, I got a text from Rodney after we started saying he couldn't make it today, as our last dairy farmer who has unfortunately sold his cows in the State House. I always love to have his input in this. So, Bill, the idea is to do this quickly, and I don't know what kind of time frame. I think Amanda brought up a really good point about who's going to be processing these, I would say, applications, and is the staff there to do it, and what are the requirements? Are we going to ask that every farm be in good standing with the clean water regulations? These are things we need to move on, and we need to move on them quickly. So Sharon does have her hand up, and I want her to have an opportunity to either comment or ask a question. Thanks. Sharon.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've given the time frame. I'm wondering if, and anticipating what the Senate may do or not do. I'm wondering if there was a way to, for us to maybe meet one day this weekend. I don't know if that's possible. So just so that we could hear from the processors and be ready to move forward.
Yeah, maybe Monday we could have a meeting. I just got an email from, I think it was Luke Martland, saying, our staff is really being taxed here, and they've got kids, and so I hate to ask anybody to do anything on the weekend, but maybe we could set something up for Monday. So Linda's here and we can have that discussion. But Linda's listening, but I think we need to hear from some of the processors quickly. But the other point that we need to discuss is, do we want to increase the amount that has been proposed? And so I'm looking forward to hearing from committee members about that. So I think committee members, you can unmute yourselves if you want to chime in here. If there's craziness going on, I'll start calling on people, but anybody want to say something? John O'Brien?
What did we hear? It was on average, every farm's losing 270,000. So this
something like that.
Far from making even a break-even number. I mean, this is really like farms get what, maybe a third of their loss.
Well, the large farms are going to get 110,000 under this. And these are losses. The mediums are going to get 90,000. The small certifieds are going to get 60, and the small uncertified are going to get 42.5. I may have those numbers wrong, and please feel free to correct me.
They're
So,
correct.
okay, thanks.
Carolyn,
Yeah.
I just wondered if any
Mhm.
number crunching, probably Allison and Diane have done this, but if what the price difference is, or the dollar figure, if we had somehow been able to pay 1,800 since the start of COVID, what sort of figure that would be, just to give us a comparison to how much has been lost. And even though this $40 million sounds like a lot of money, it's really, maybe something like 25% of what dairy farmers really need.
Okay. Yeah, and maybe we could do those numbers. I just got a text from Linda saying that we've been asked not to meet on Mondays because that's the day that our lawyers kind of catch up. So I'm going to call on, so maybe we can do that math, John?
Okay.
Okay, and Mike O'Grady says he's going to send us a summary of the federal program that he drafted yesterday. That's fantastic. Tom Bach?
Carolyn, I think we should use, I think it was Diane's numbers where she was talking about another 4 or 5 million added onto that. So if we added 10% onto that 40 million, appropriations are going to want to see numbers. And how are we going to justify that increase? And I think we could rely on her numbers. And
Diane Botfeld's?
Yeah. Amanda St. Pierre, I think, had the numbers of 14 million.
Yeah, so that's about 42 million.
Bring it up, if we added 10% to that.
Yeah.
It's not a lot, but I think appropriations are going to want to see justification.
So you're suggesting maybe 44 million?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Tom. Terry?
Well, it's just not going to be enough anyway, but I think the way Anson talked, the agency discussed it a lot and came up with these numbers, and I would be happy to go with what they have decided on. It's not like they've just pulled these numbers out of the hat.
Mm-hmm.
And I, as you probably are well aware, there's going to be a lot of requests for this money. That's, if we ask for another 10 million, there's human services are going to ask for another 10 million or 20 million. And next thing you know, there'll be lots of infighting. Well, who's going to get this? Who's going to get that? And that'll just drag things on. That's just the way politics works, I think. So I would be quite happy that we can get 40 million and for the dairy farmers and 10 for the processors, but we'll see how the processors feel about it.
Terry, you don't want to leave ourselves a little bargaining space?
Well, we could add another 5 million. Split the difference.
Yeah, okay. Sharon and then Vicky and then Amanda. Sharon?
So would it make sense in the name of expediency to ask for some written testimony from processors so that we have a chance to go over that earlier, and then we can hear from them and be closer to making our decision? And also I'm hearing what Terry said about trusting that the agency had did the hard work with the numbers. But I seem to recall, Madam Chair, that you have a knack of saying, and if there might be any extra money, we would be very happy to receive that, which seems to work pretty well.
Yeah, well, everybody, trust me, everybody's going to be asking for more than in their proposals. I think there are 5 different proposals. So whether or not we ask for more, they're going to ask for more. So.
And part of, our discussion today is about how right now this is basically money that's going to immediately fly off the farm to the vendors and support services. And so in the future, we will be looking at, we have to look at a way to, as Bill Rowell's been working on, a way to move forward that is sustainable. So I'm assuming that, you know, if we get this 40 million and 10 million, that in the future, there will be other monies or programs or ways to support dairy farming that doesn't, you know, doesn't have everybody just making as much milk as they can, because, you know, when prices are bad, you make as much milk to survive. And when prices are good, you make as much milk to recover from the debt you incurred while milk prices were down.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Sharon. We actually have a hard stop in about 8 minutes, and we'll figure this out probably over the weekend. Vicky has her hand up. Amanda does too. And Mike O'Grady chatted with me saying that there is a federal program as well that will make up to $250,000 available to dairy farms. He'll send us a draft. I didn't get the first part of his email last time, so sorry about that. Vicky?
I don't have a lot of comment, Carolyn, other than the sense of urgency. And if we fool around too much, it just every day is vital to the farmers. So whatever we can do to be expedient and a sense of urgency, I'm all in favor of. If we vote later this afternoon or what have you, but it's urgent. So that's all I want to say.
Okay. So Amanda, John Bartholomew just put his hand up, and because he's a committee member, I'm going to call on him before I do you. John?
You had mentioned possibly limiting funds going to farmers that aren't meeting water quality standards. Is there something in their proposal now that says that, or is that just something?
You probably hopped onto the meeting after Mike O'Grady told us that that was part of the original Senate Dairy Assistance Program bill, but it's not part of the feds. So Mike O'Grady, do you have anything additional that you would like to say?
No, it's still part of the Senate draft bill. They're going forward with their own proposal separate from the administration. It's very similar to the administration, but it is not identical.
Okay. All right. We'll figure out this process thing going forward, because we can come up with our own, sorry about my phone, our own process. Amanda, would you like to say something now?
Just real quick, I just wanted to let the committee know that, in fact, some of this money, most of this money probably will be directly assigned to vendors. That's how quick it's going to go out the door. And that, again, in our industry, it circulates the economy 7 to 8 times. I'd also say that, you know, the mechanism of about 750, 100 weight, based on the production that Diane and the Ag Agency uses for Vermont dairy production, is how we came up with our numbers. We took their information based on the milk forecast, and that's how we came up with that. That mechanism can be used in another month or two as we look to the fall, if we're going to need to come up with another wave of funding. And I think, you know, to keep it simple, move it forward as fast as possible. And thank you all for your consideration and time.
Okay. Amanda, thank you so much. Sorry, somebody's leaving a message for me. Life goes on here. All right. We have about 5 minutes. I don't know if there's anything anybody would like to add. I'm hearing that we want to move on this quickly. I've heard different numbers. I've heard people say that they are interested in the 40. I've heard people saying, yeah, we could maybe factor in another 10% and go to 44. My understanding of the process is that we just need to make a recommendation to our appropriations committee. And I don't know how the process is going to work in terms of what the Senate might be sending us. John O'Brien, you have your hand up.
Is this even a bill yet, or is it more likely just going to be added to the skinny budget?
Mike O'Grady, there you are.
So the administration has proposed a standalone bill for the $400 million. It was first rolled out in House Commerce, I believe, yesterday or maybe the day before, late in the day. I've asked the Agency of Ag if that language can be available to you. They asked that it not be distributed as of yet because they're still making some revisions. I've just asked them again this morning whether I can make the dairy assistance language available to you. As soon as they approve, I'll send it to the committee.
Thanks, Mike.
Because we might want to work backwards and say, how can we get checks to dairy farms by July 1st? And if it becomes wound up in one of the budgets, who knows, it might be Labor Day before checks get sent out.
I think it's going to be, it may not, I don't know how to say this. It might take a week or so to get this through. And so it will probably move with expediency, but it won't happen probably next week.
Okay. The other question that sort of comes to my mind, and we have 3 minutes, and then Linda actually turns into a pumpkin, speaking of pumpkins, so we've got to get off by 9:45. The other thing that comes to my mind is that this is federal money, and I'm reluctant to put that requirement that people be in good standing with the clean water stuff, because I'm sure those farms owe money to vendors too if they're struggling. Mike?
So it is federal money, but you can set up the criteria that you want for award of the funds. So you can include good standing or not. That's really up to you. Good standing is already a requirement for ag water quality financing. Being in compliance with the laws is also generally a criteria for USDA funds and NRCS funds. But again, this is criteria that you can set yourself, and that's up to you.
Okay, thank you. Mandy, is your hand up again? Or did you just not lower it?
I'm sorry, I didn't lower it.
Okay, fine.
Sorry.
Good. So it's we now have 1 minute and I think actually 30 seconds. So let's wrap this up. This meeting of the House Agriculture and Forestry Committee. We will meet Monday. Not Monday. We will not meet Monday. We'll meet Tuesday at our normal time, which is 9:30. And perhaps over the weekend, we'll be getting drafts of stuff so that we can be absorbing it and digesting it and coming up with some other ideas. So right now, Linda, take us off